Have your attention, please. You'll have to bear with me. This is my first attempt at speaking in front of a large crowd, so I'm quite nervous. It's pretty important to me and the rest of us, so I'm going to do it. Thank you for coming. My name is Larry Cleveland. I've lived in West Ridge my entire life, as have my father, grandmother, and great-grandfather. I'm a member of Save Our Town, a group of concerned residents who are trying to get information to people who may not know how federal government funding really works and how it will affect our town negatively. The guest speakers here tonight are State Representatives John Burke and Jack Flanagan. The reason why we have invited you here tonight is because our town is headed down a very dangerous road. The road once traveled will have no point of return. This is why we need to stop or turn around before it's too late. I'm talking about the Rindge Charrette, also known as the West Ridge Revitalization Project. A charrette is an intense period of planning that's used in planning and urban planning. Some of you might have never seen this map before. This is what is being brought, what they want to bring to town. They tell you that this is the plan, it's a conceptual drawing of what they want to do at the intersections of 119 and 202. It's the first picture you'll see when you read the charrette. I'm guessing many of you have never seen this. I never knew about this until last January. I was going to receive a flyer advertising a meeting at the West Ridge Methodist Church, which I attended. I then attended another meeting in June. Each meeting was held to ask what the residents of West Ridge would like to see in their community. The strange part was this plan was already adopted in the master plan back in July of 2012. Why wouldn't our elected officials wait until after the plan was adopted to ask what we would like to see? Hasn't that already been determined? Some folks in the town hall will tell you that you should have known about this. They had a planning board meeting to vote on adopting this back in July 2012, for which they posted public notices. They said there was a notice in the town hall, in the local paper, and handed out flyers at the transfer station. What if you don't read the paper or use the transfer station, or only go to the town hall a couple times a year? I guess you're out of the information loop, but you're still on the hook for paying for any decisions made by them without your input. Why wouldn't they send out flyers to everyone and vote as important as entering something into the master plan? A plan that is used to guide the future of Rindge, and that will change the face of Rindge forever. I asked the town official why they didn't send out flyers like they did to advertise the meetings after the charrette was adopted. I was told by town officials that people would complain about spending money on flyers. As you were, I was a little shocked by that statement because people complain all the time about money the town spends and to no avail. Our group, Save Our Town, got together to discuss how to advertise for this meeting and pooled our money and sent out 2,291 flyers. It cost us $516. It is our view that it wasn't a money issue. It is that some of the town officials just didn't want you to know. This is where Save Our Town comes in. We want you to know. We want you to know everything about this dangerous plan. Some town officials want you to know only the warm and fuzzy things about this plan, such as having a place for the community to meet and socialize, like having little stores and shops to which to congregate and have a sense of community. Don't we already have all this? What they don't tell you about is how all this is funded largely by HUD, the Federal Housing and Urban Development Agency that is pushing its way into communities in New Hampshire and around the country. This right here is what I pulled off the New Hampshire Housing and Finance Authority's webpage. On here, there are 21 towns that are getting grants through HUD for some reason or another. Out of these, 15 of them are getting grants for mixed-use zoning or workforce housing. This plan provides grants to towns in New Hampshire through the NHHFA. What we're not being told, and in their defense, some of the town officials may not even know, is that once the town agrees to move ahead with this plan, there's no way out. That is right, HUD, the federal government, will now tell you where and how many workforce housing units will be built. They didn't mention that in the meeting. They didn't mention that in the meeting at the church. Bear with me for a second. I was told by a member of the planning board that there was no such plans for housing units. And if I speak about this, I will look like a fool and lose all my credibility. I was told that this is just a concept and not necessarily going to happen. Well, folks, this is what was said in the NHHFA paperwork. Rindge, West Rindge Village Mixed Use Project. The town will draft several regulatory changes for the March 2014 town meeting that will set the stage for the transformation of West Rindge Village and the adjacent four corners, routes 202 and 119, into a vibrant center of the community for social, small-scale, commercial, and residential uses. The town's recent plan, New Hampshire, Charrette, and CPG Round 1 regulatory review recommended the adoption of design guidelines or regulations. The grant was $24,820. I then received a reply from the town administrator to a post I put on the town's Facebook page. It consisted of math equations on how much each unit will cost and what income level is required to qualify for living in one. Why are there calculations for something that isn't necessarily going to happen? Is this more deception? When I receive conflicting information from different town officials, I know I need to ask what is really going on. There are numerous towns, cities, and counties around America that are now regretting accepting this plan. It is easily researched online. 2 local towns not far from here narrowly escaped this government-funded plan by educating residents and getting them to stand up and say no. In a few minutes, the 2 state representatives will be up here to tell you why we should be saying no and how we do it. There's another piece of the puzzle some of the town officials are not telling you. They will say the Charrette is at the town office and online, which it is for you to see. The problem is most residents don't know about it. And that is what they are counting on. If I didn't go to the meeting that had to do with the area that I live in, I wouldn't have known about this plan. You see, I never get involved in politics. In fact, if you told me that I'd be getting involved, I would have told you you were crazy. If you told me that I would be giving a speech in front of several people, I would have told you you were insane. Well, here I am. So what we have here, if you dig deep into this on page 20 of the Charrette, you're going to find some pretty scary things. Look at item 2. Pursue zoning changes to enable this plan. On August 12th, I received another comment on the town's Facebook page from Carlotta Pini, and I quote, "There is no plan to change zoning in West Rindge Village," end quote. More deception? They talked about changing the lot sizes in the village district to much smaller lots. Why? So they can cram in more and more commercial and housing space? Folks, if you remember, there was a ballot item last year to change the northeast corner of the intersection from Village District to the Gateway District. It failed only because the late Richard Smith, who was an abutter, submitted a petition so the measure would need a certain percentage of the vote to pass. It didn't. Luckily, he did that and he saved us for now. He is now gone, which means this question is presented again and you must vote it down. The town hinges on zoning changes to get the ball rolling. We need to stop it. Item 4, more bad news. The scary part, more grants and incremental tax funding. It says it right there in the Charrette plan. Item 12, really? No mention of dangerous grants for this. That one reads, explore tax increment financing for water, sewer, road, landscaping, sidewalk, and other improvements recommended in this plan. Does this mean the town will be embarking on town water and sewer using incremental tax increases? The sidewalks. Several people have mentioned the care needed for sidewalks at the meetings at the church. We were told that the store owners will be responsible for maintenance. Really? What about the proposed housing units? Will the occupants be responsible for their sidewalks? We doubt it. Folks, this plan is being touted as the greatest thing for the residents of Rindge. If we don't accept this plan, developers will be able to come in and put a store in every corner. Isn't that what they're proposing in this plan anyways? Stores and commercial space with apartments stacked on top of these commercial spaces. And who will live in these apartments? Who will live in the housing units across the street? Will our neighborhoods be safe? Will it make our schools less safe? It has in communities that have low-income housing. That's a fact. And with more people being offered living space, how will it affect the school system? More kids equal bigger schools and more teachers. That equals higher taxes. All this adds up to disaster. Losing the ability to control our town because the federal government will have the final say on how many low-income housing you must have and higher taxes that go with them. We will need more police, more fire equipment, more DPW workers and equipment, and that's not to mention the water and sewer elements. Are your taxes high enough now? Mine are. I like what is left of our small rural community. You should too. Look, I realize we can't stop progress. It's a fact of life, but we shouldn't get into the habit of accepting grants without thorough research and that have too many strings attached. If we can't afford it on our own, we shouldn't build it. Isn't that how you run your own personal lives? That's, my friends, is just common sense. Thank you for coming. Now let's get We're going to take all the questions you want after the presentation. These guys have traveled a long ways, so I'd like to, afterwards you can ask all the questions you'd like, okay?
Thank you, Larry. My name is Jack Flanagan. I live in Brookline, so it's not too far away. I also represent the town of Mason, and if anybody's ever been to Mason, they'll know that you can get lost really easy just trying to get to the town hall. And I did that a number of times. Just a quick story is I had navigation in my car, and I was looking for a road, and it sent me to this road. And then the road got narrower, and the woods got more, and then the road got narrower, and then all of a sudden the road ended into a pine tree. And I said, well, this isn't right. So I went back, and I saw somebody goes, oh, you need to go down the road, take a right, take another right, and then you'll run into the road, but they just never finished the road. So the road has the same name, but you got to go through the forest to get there. Rindge, let me also, I thought I saw John Hunt. There he is, John Hunt, and I don't know if Sue Emerson is here. Let me just tell you too, is you have great legislators out of Rindge. They're well respected in their committees, very well respected in Concord, and good to see you again, John. That's what I heard, but I wasn't sure. I got an email, I don't know if it was from Larry or somebody, that there were going to be some extremists here. So before I start talking about it, let me just tell you a little bit about my background so then you can really tell what kind of extremist I am. I was the former vice chair of a cooperative school district in Hollis and Brookline. I was the chairman of the SAU that serves Hollis and Brookline. I was a selectman in the town of Brookline. I was the chairman of the finance committee, and I'm currently serving on my second term in the New Hampshire House of Representatives. So if that makes me an extremist, yes, I'm an extremist. But the reason I'm here to talk to you about these grants is that when I was a selectman, we decided to have mixed use. And from a selectman's perspective, I just wanted to know more about it. I wasn't advocating it, but I just didn't know all the nuances that are associated with mixed use. So I agreed to a charge. Well, when the charge came, we all had to sign it, and foolishly I just signed it without reading it. Well, the charge not only it was researched, but we were going to put a warrant article to incorporate mixed use into our subdivision regulations. And I said, I never agreed to that. And they said, well, you signed it. So what happened was they came and looked for a grant from, as Larry said, from the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. And I just happened to have a copy of it. So I learned my lesson, and I said, I'm going to read the grant. I mean, shame on me for not reading the charge, but I'm going to read the grant. And this one paragraph, paragraph 7, really got my attention because this was an agreement between the town of Brookline and the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. But paragraph 7 says, compliance with all applicable local, state, federal laws, regulation, and rules. I said, why would we have, what is all this? So then I went on and read some more. It says, the municipality acknowledges and agrees that the CPG program, the Community Planning Grant, is governed by certain local, state, and federal laws, regulation, and rules, which shall include, but not limited to, the provisions of Form HUD 1044. I said to my town administrator, have you seen HUD Form 1044? And they go, well, no. So get me a copy of HUD Form 1044. So, to make a very, very long story short, the words sub-guarantor of disagreement between the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority and HUD also applies to the people who gets the grants. Yes, Jonathan's kind of look at his face. So, by accepting the money, the town of Rindge is now agreeing to all rules, regulations, and to be in compliance with all federal laws, rules, and regulations. And Representative Byrd's gonna talk about a situation, and you may have others, in which someone had an issue about a certain town or a county and said they weren't in compliance with a federal law, and now they're getting hit with a $1 billion project on their own dime because they took the money. Now, I'm not saying that's gonna happen in Rindge, but boy, if you don't comply with these rules, by just accepting that money, you may have to. Now, as a selectman, the money came in, I managed to get a majority of the voters on the Board of Selectmen to say no, send it back. So we sent the money back. And the reason I said let's send it back is, if we don't know what our exposure is, because our benefit was only, I think it was $24,000, right? Why would we want to do that? Why would we want to jeopardize the town's assets, meaning your homes and your tax dollars, into something that we didn't have an answer to? So we sent the money back. And that's what happened with Representative Byrd is in the town of Goffstown. He had a similar situation. And I got together and we did a little presentation. And I believe they're going to send some of the money back, or they took some of it. But the long and short of it is if you've already received the money, don't get caught with your town's assets in jeopardy. And just one final thing was, I went to a hearing in Concord, and it was the Granite State Futures and the Regional Planning Commissions got together, and the executive director of the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, Ben Frost, used to serve in Holland, so I know him. And I asked him straight up, are there any strings attached to this money? And he hemmed and he hawed, and he gave me half answers, and I said, Ben, are there any strings attached with this money? And he goes, Jack, there's strings attached to all money. But yes, to answer your question, we could be responsible to the applicable rules, regulations, and laws that HUD was for. And I wasn't going to leave because I think I got my daughter's cold, but if I sit down in that chair near this cool breeze, I'll be able to stick around and answer some questions. But John's going to, Representative Byrd, is going to take some examples of what some other towns have experienced. Again, all I can share with you is my experiences. I think instead of jeopardizing the town's assets for $10,000, $20,000, whatever it is, you like mixed use, you like workforce housing, so you won't have that, shall we say, monkey on your back. Because, why would you ever want to be responsible for something you don't know what may come down the pipe? Or better yet, what somebody in Washington, D.C. decides what affordable housing is, what fair housing is, or whatever else it is that they can impose on you because you put $20,000. $20,000 that you probably could afford. But I'll stick around, Larry. I said I'd leave it. Let me just sit down here. Yeah.
I do want to thank you for coming. This is a real impressive crowd to get this many people here. Larry did a great job.
I had a lot of help.
Well, I had about 150 people according to the paper. I think there was actually a little, but I don't think that number showed up at my meeting. Why I did it is I wanted to show the taxpayers and the voters so what could happen with this plan if it went through. The problem is they keep saying HUD has nothing to do with this. They said it's all New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. They're the ones that are doing whatever, giving the grants, et cetera, et cetera. But where do they get the money? HUD. Where does HUD get the money? From. That is the problem. So I got a little skid because I did this in Barnet. I did this in Bernardville, up in Goffstown, and it worked really well. It sent the message exactly what HUD is up to. And if I could have Robert and Janice. Show you what we're going to do here. These out. I try to have a mean face. This is New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. They're the liaison in New Hampshire. This is Rindge.
Always.
Pull this out. Now what I want to show you, again, I'm here's New Hampshire Housing Finance. See the size of me? I'm pretty big. He's a little bit smaller, well, to be honest, a lot smaller. But he is a lot bigger than cute little Rindge over there. And see how cute Rindge is? This is just this cute little Rindge. Sitting in New Hampshire, just want to be left alone. Just want to enjoy life here in New Hampshire, live free or die. Well, this is what happens. Here's a check from HUD. I give it to the New Hampshire Housing Finance. But one thing I also do, look at the rules. Lots of rules. A ton of them. That is behind the check. There you are. Rindge comes and says, hey, can I get a little bit of money? I want to do this project. New Hampshire Housing Finance says, absolutely. And they give cute little Rindge the check, but behind there is the rules. And if you notice, there's still strings attached all the way over to HUD. That is how they do it. This is what we do not want in this community. We don't want it in Goffstown. Luckily, we got rid of it before you even got to that. Well, I want to thank the participants for showing you this. Remember the strings. That's what you want to avoid. We don't want it in Goffstown. They didn't want it in many other towns that are holding this down. Salem, Brookline. A lot of towns are holding this down because they see the strings. It's not just to New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. It's the HUD. If you look at the grant, now I'm not sure if your grant is actually like Goffstown grant, but in there it said, and I'm using these fictitious numbers. I believe in some, very little, workforce housing, Section 8 housing. I believe in helping people out. So we have to have some. So let's say Goffstown wants to build 30, 40 units. But HUD, and that's just a make-up number, HUD says, no, I want you to have 1,000. And we go, are you serious? We're not going to build 1,000 of these. They break all disagreements in the contract. They're the final judge. That is the biggest problem with this program. They make the rules up as they go. I'm going to show you a video. It's about 12 minutes long. It's a little bit too long than I would prefer. The first 3-4 minutes is really good. You're going to be sucked right in. There's going to be about 3 minutes that you're going to glaze over and go, all right, where's this guy going? But it's the last 4 minutes that nails what you guys are going to get into. That is the biggest part you want to see, but it all falls together. So it's a real good video. I'm going to shut the lights off there, and hopefully somebody brought popcorn. We'll go ahead and start.
Quick history. The county was sued in 2006 under the False Claims Act of 1863. The charge was that the county accepted federal dollars from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, but failed to study whether race is a factor in housing opportunities. 2009, former County Executive Andrew Spano and the Board of Legislators settled the case. And critically important, there was never a finding of fact of wrongdoing on the part of the county or an admission of guilt in the settlement. Instead of going to court, the county and the federal government both agreed to settle under the following terms. The county would spend at least $51 million to build 750 units of housing for lower-income people in 31 so-called eligible or mostly white communities by the end of 2016. Now, progress is measured by annual benchmarks and significant penalties for failing to meet them. So let's look at our progress. The county is well ahead of schedule. By the end of 2013, the county must have 300 units with financing in place. We surpassed that benchmark in March. Everyone in the county should be proud of that record, and I know I am. Not just because we are meeting our obligations, but because of the way we are doing it, by working cooperatively with our towns and villages. And I'm proud of how, through the decades, the communities have been building affordable housing, not just to meet their own needs, but also the needs of the entire region. And we have more than 50 awards to show for it, even some from HUD. And for the record, I am proud that Westchester is the fourth most diverse county in all of New York State in terms of African Americans and Hispanics. We are tied with Manhattan. And Westchester's diversity is one of our greatest strengths. And as county executive, I will defend with every tool at my disposal the right of people to live in any neighborhood in Westchester, in any home they can afford. And let me say this very clear. There is absolutely no place for discrimination in our county. The biggest, and really the only issue going forward, is zoning. The federal government has a very different agenda and vision for Westchester. In fact, HUD calls us its, quote, grand experiment. That means Washington bureaucrats, who you will never see or meet, want the power to determine how each neighborhood will look. Now, what's at stake is the fundamental right of our cities, towns, and villages to plan and zone for themselves. This home rule is guaranteed by the New York State Constitution. HUD thinks it can trample on Westchester because it has the misguided notion that zoning and discrimination are the same thing. They are not. Zoning restricts what can be built, not who lives there. Zoning exists to keep traffic from endangering kids on their way to school, to prevent factory noise and smoke from invading residential neighborhoods, and to stop raw sewage from polluting our drinking water. Zoning exists to protect quality of life for everyone. Take away the zoning that protects Westchester's reservoirs and watershed, and you put the drinking water of 8 million New York City residents at risk. Now listen carefully, because I know what I'm about to tell you sounds exaggerated and unbelievable, but it's not. And I urge you to go to westchestergov.com and read for yourself the letters I'm about to reference. In its letter of May 13, 2011, HUD insists the county must go, quote, beyond the four corners of the settlement. In other words, they admitted that what they are demanding is not in the agreement, and their demands are outrageous. HUD wants no restrictions in any neighborhood on height, size, acreage, density, number of bedrooms, and lack of water or sewers. In fact, in a letter on March 13th this year, HUD goes so far as to even attack single-family, quarter-acre lots as, quote, restrictive zoning practices that, in their view, could be discriminatory. Really? Well, like many in this county, I live in a modest house on a quarter-acre piece of land, and my home is my biggest investment. And I thought working hard, paying your taxes, and one day paying off your mortgage was the American dream. Now think about what's at stake. The federal government is trying to force me, as county executive, to sue each municipality to abolish even basic zoning protections. Now what does that mean for you if that happens? It means the neighborhood you live in today could change over time. and there is nothing you can do to stop it. A 5-story building or higher could be put on your street, not only by HUD, but by any developer. Because if you take away the zoning rules for HUD, you take away the rules for everyone. And that's not all. New demands by HUD just keep on coming, each one more overreaching than the last. In that same March 13th letter, HUD contends that the settlement's requirement to build 750 units of affordable housing was just a starting point. The county's target is really 10,768, based on an old 2004 Rutgers University study that was never even accepted by the county. Let me say that number again. 10,768 housing units. That's almost 15 times the settlement's requirement. And that study allocates a number to each community. Harrison, 756 units. That's for the entire settlement. North Castle, 712 units. Bedford, 396 units. Starkville, 160 units. The list goes on and on until you reach 10,768. Now, a dollar figure on 10,768 units, and the cost is between $700 million and $1 billion. Now, to come up with $1 billion, we would have to raise county property taxes 200%. 200%, at a time when the state tax cap is 2%. How's that going to work? And that's just county taxes. School and local taxes would certainly increase too, along with crowded classrooms and a strain on services. And here is what is so frustrating. We have tried to work with HUD. They ask for something, and our staff spends hours and hours to provide them with volumes and volumes of data. For HUD, zoning has become a civil rights concern, and they told us to review their list of 6 restrictive zoning practices. So we did. We studied and analyzed them across all 853 zoning districts throughout Westchester. Then we applied more than 30 additional criteria. In all, we looked at more than 26,000 data points. Conclusion: Westchester zoning is not exclusionary based on race. The major impediment is economics. People live where they choose and where they can afford. HUD wasn't satisfied. Now they wanted a legal analysis. So we asked Professor John Nolan at the Case University Land Use Law Center, a leading expert on affordable housing. So he conducted a separate legal analysis. And guess what? His conclusion supported ours. Each time we've asked the federal government to provide proof of exclusionary zoning, they come up with no answer. And they certainly have no answer for this. How could the zoning in the settlement's 31 eligible communities be exclusionary if the county is ahead of schedule building affordable housing in those communities? It's pretty obvious. The federal government will not be satisfied until we give them the answer that they want, no matter what the facts are. And now comes the insidious part. To intimidate the county into changing our conclusions on zoning, HUD has been withholding money that was promised to our local communities for the last 2 years. The amount is now up to $12 million. And this money not only goes towards affordable housing, it goes to communities that have nothing to do with the settlement, and some of Westchester's neediest residents with programs like homelessness prevention. You know, I appealed to HUD Secretary Sean Donovan for an explanation and reconsideration. We were denied. I want to thank the members of the Board of Legislators who joined me this week on a fully bipartisan basis to have this arbitrary decision by HUD reversed, even if that means going to court. So, we've been at this for more than 3 years, and frankly, it is very tiring and disheartening. But going up against Goliath is never easy. Some people want me to just give in. They accuse me of being stubborn, or worse. Believe me, the easiest thing for me personally would be to cave in, blame it on the past administration, and not worry about the future. But how do you give in when you were taught as a kid that you have to be willing to stand up for what you believe in, and what you know as an adult, that the thing you treasure most, freedom, is rarely regained if lost. So when you hear me warn about HUD overreaching, this is it. 31 communities becomes the entire county. 750 units become 10,768. And $51 million becomes $1 billion and a 200% tax hike to pay for it. Now, I have said from day one that Westchester will comply with what's in the agreement, but we will not be bullied or threatened by HUD to do things that are not in the settlement. It all comes down to this. HUD thinks that Westchester is some kind of grand experiment, that it can strip away our constitutionally protected rights, and that it can dismantle local zoning. I say Westchester is our home, not a test tube. I say Westchester residents didn't stop becoming American citizens the day the deal was signed in 2009. And I say nothing gives HUD the right to turn the American dream upside down, and I will continue to stand up for Westchester, our communities, and all the people who live here.
So it's your choice. You wanna follow Westchester?
We don't have their kind of money.
The residents of Goffstown did. I'm gonna explain War Brookline and Salem and many others. I'm gonna explain how Goffstown did it after we take some questions, because I know Representative Flanagan's here, and, I think he'd like to get moving on home to rest a little, so if you do have some questions on what Representative Flanagan said or the video, I'd be more than happy to answer them, or Representative Flanagan.
I have two questions right off the bat. With HUD forcing us, in air quotes, to re-examine our zoning laws, I almost took it to mean as if like, you could be penalized for having too much acreage. Did I hear that wrong? It's like, for example, if my wife and I have too much land, are we gonna be penalized by HUD or by the town of Rindge?
What happened in Westchester is a little bit different than what they were planning for Goffstown, but on the similar basis that HUD breaks all, when we don't agree. HUD is the final, yeah. So if they could come up with any scheme they want. I don't think that, that's to the extreme.
Let me try to answer that. We jokingly say up in Concord that the administrative agencies are the fourth branch of government. Remember Civics 101, the judiciary, the legislative, and the executive. Well, just to quote paragraph 7, again, compliance with applicable local, state, federal laws, regulations, and rules. Emphasis on rules. So I don't know what the rules are. I don't know what the HUD regulations are. I mean, they're probably volumes and volumes thick. And to answer your question about land, New Hampshire's pretty strong on ownership and personal property rights. But what they could do is similar to what they're doing in Westchester, is saying, well, based on the population, you don't have enough X type of housing, affordable housing. You don't have enough minorities, or you don't, the workforce housing. We have a statute, RSA 684, deals with workforce housing, which says that you have to have a certain amount of, I think Larry was talking about it, certain number of income levels, certain number of square feet, that type of thing. So I don't know all the rules and answers, but I don't think they can take away your land.
They could probably tax us more for having a focus on that.
Well, what they'll do is they'll force some type of compliance on their rule.
Okay.
and that would end up taxing you, like they said their taxes are gonna go up 200%.
I think the second question, I think this is on everybody's mind, is that if this is such a monster, why would our town leaders be pushing for this? What's in it for them?
Money.
More raises.
Let me, smart zoning, really, I wanna go down that path. Smart zoning is concerned about fossil fuels. Okay, smart, which is what you hear now, it's sustainable growth, sustainable development, okay? And what it really is like mixed use allows you to have the businesses on the lower level and the houses on the top level, so if you worked in that store, you can live above it. Or workforce housing, in some towns, workforce housing is very applicable. Like the town of Hollis, a building lot's $250,000. So the firefighters can't afford to live in town, so that's why they develop workforce housing. So the workforce can actually live in the town that they work, and it's a reasonable concept. But what ends up happening is, like in Westchester's case, they're just out of control.
But that really doesn't answer my question. What's in it for them? What's in it for the town leadership?
Oh,
Why do they want this?
You have to ask them. I mean, usually it's someone who's committed to that type of zone. They feel that it's important, it's, like, for example, in Brookline, they like the concept of, does anybody know Pepperell and Townsend, Massachusetts? You notice how you drive through the center of town and there's like a insurance agent and there's apartment buildings on it and everything looks sort of quaint and yuppie-like? Well, that's what they wanted to do with the Brookline, but the trouble is the people that lived in the center of town, they didn't want that. They didn't even bother to ask the people that lived in the center of town. And then to make matters worse, is they didn't bother to figure out if the septic systems would handle a business, whether it be handle a lot of parking, whether it be traffic issues. So I can't answer your question about what motivates somebody else to do it, but it's sort of the buzzword in planning. I mean, and the other thing is planning is helped by these regional planning associations. And they're the ones that are working with the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. So they're sort of all in together.
I'll grab this lady in the back that did have a question, ma'am. You, and then I'll go to right here and then.
I basically wanna know how far we've gone with this. Have we accepted any money in Rindge, or does anybody know?
Yes, they've accepted about, just shy of $25,000.
Doubtful? Who offered?
Yeah, they have, but I'll explain what Goffstown, we're in the same situation. I'll explain
Larry
that.
mentioned the planning board, and he mentioned Charlotte. Now, is the select, one of the boards are also involved, the select board, I presume, is also involved in accepting this. And
They are the ones that accept it. It goes to the selectmen first, and then it has to go to the planning.
And they can bypass the citizens, accept this money, and then.
No, that's where, luckily in New Hampshire, it's different. The guy that did it's called Plan Bernardville. I don't know why they came up with this name, and Bernardville is a village in Goffstown. The guy that came up with this concept is from Tennessee. So I'm going, what the heck's he doing in my town? Get him out of here. Well, he comes right up to me because he sees my badge. And he goes, oh, representative. He thinks I'm hook, line, and sinker right in with the government. So he's like, oh, what is up with New Hampshire? I said, what do you mean? He goes, wherever I am in the whole country, I just have to go up to the selectmen, aldermen, the mayor, and just talk them into it, which is easy, because they're government people. Because he's thinking I'm government, so I'm going to side with him. And he goes, so why, what's this about? We have to go in front of the voters with this. It was like a dirty word, the voters. And I looked at him and I said, well, apparently, sir, you don't know who I am, but this is New Hampshire, live free or die. I want it in front of the voters because I'm not impressed with what I'm seeing so far. And he looks at my badge again and goes, what do you mean? You're one of us. And I said, no. I just didn't like it right from the beginning.
Just on the side note too, is if most towns would have to put an ordinance through in which you'd be voting on it in a ballot.
Yeah.
Okay? It wouldn't be voted on at a town meeting where you go and vote for the budgets and things like that. But a lot of towns have,
Are they SB2 here?
We are,
okay,
So you're luckily in one way.
but the point being is most people, especially with zoning changes, they just vote yes for all of them. You know, most of them pass like a hot knife through butter. And the thing being is, get the word out. I mean, Larry started it, get the word out that if they want to put an ordinance through, that, you know, you want them to be accountable, and explain it.
There's a way of changing
What's that?
the word, the article, in layman's terms.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sick of this law bull crap.
They're the ones that, with their attorneys.
Yeah.
Can you explain how the blind what's already been done?
Yeah, I can. What happened in Goffstown is they accepted the grant. The selectmen did. It's a $50,000 grant. We've spent about $39,000. It started going through the plan. They had this charrette thing. They even had kids come and color some pictures to make everybody feel. Then we started looking into it and we're going, whoa, we don't want this. And then we got a hold of the grant, and that was the real bad part. The grant was the scary, scary part. I mean, the zones are too. You know, the zoning regulations are too, but the grant had all the rules in it. So what we did is we started forming, and said, look, we want to stop this. But our selectmen said, so they started just pushing it through. Well, then I held a little meeting like this. All of a sudden, the next planning board, where they were gonna vote on it, over 250 people showed up. Our fine fire chief even showed up, pushed people out, because we had so many people in the tent, in the building. So they had to set up another room with a TV, the whole 9 yards. So, you know, and they're in there screaming, kill this, kill this. So we got the message to the planning board, they voted it down. So luckily, it's dead at this point, but I'll bring up a little bit more in a minute.
The other thing too is, I think from talking to different people, the amount that Rindge took was 20,000, 25, 24, and I don't know what your budget is, but I assume it's close to what Brookline is. It's probably $3 million budget, somewhere along there. So to find $20,000, $25,000 to pay back might not be a Herculean task. They might be able to just say, they hear enough from you folks to say that we don't want to jeopardize our assets of our town, then pay them back.
And the first one is, I guess Goffstown recently, constructed, workforce housing, this is 2010, it's a big workforce
Yes.
housing project. Could you tell us about the sort of negative impact from that project and how HUD has?
John knows, I was the legislator who tried to amend workforce housing 2 terms, last term and this term. And we were close last term, but not so close this term because of the Democratic control of House. The interesting thing about workforce housing is there's money for the builders. There's subsidies for the renters. I mean, there's money being pushed into it. But the worst thing about workforce housing is that they tell the builder in their contract that if they can't sell the dwellings as workforce housing, they can just sell it to anybody, which defeats the whole purpose. Because you would want, you know, limited number of children because of the effect on schools, I think Larry brought up. But all of a sudden, now you could have, you know, 3 kids in this small house, which may be generating, you know, 2 or 3. Well, that's the way they word the loan. So workforce housing has its benefits. And like I talked to you about, a town like Hollis or Stratford, which is another affluent town where real estate is very expensive, it has a place. I know a lot of the nuances of workforce housing, and if someone was going to bring you workforce housing and I could tell them how to beat it.
But I just wanted John to represent from your.
Yes, John Jack.
To address the issue of, you know, how you saw crime increase as a result of workforce housing.
Yes, unfortunately, most of Manchester is across the river, the Squatic River. They brought some workforce housing. It was all supposed to be elderly. I think it's 3 or 4 story. I think there's 5 or 6 units out there, and it's right on the edge of Manchester. edge of Goffstown. The second they built that, what we built has been managed. And I think it's doing well. What they built, all of a sudden went from elderly homes to Section 8. So now our crime is way up and our police chief is requesting more officers.
So, are either of you familiar with the New Hampshire Workforce Housing Law, RSA 674? That says that it requires all municipalities to provide reasonable and realistic opportunities for the development of homes that are affordable to low and moderate income families. You're familiar with that?
He sponsored a bill to repeal it, I was a co-sponsor.
Well, what's reasonable?
Yeah.
So the thing is, that my understanding is that the reason that Rindge signed on to, participate in a plan for workforce housing is that if you do not have plans in place, if you are not working towards the goal, then any developer can come to your town, and if they find, I'm not talking eminent domain, so nobody panic here, but if they find a willing partner who has land and they decide to put in a workforce housing project, if the town has deliberately not provided the kind of zoning and the kind of laws that would support workforce housing, and if they don't have sufficient workforce housing in the town, then they will be forced to leave. And it has nothing to do with HUD, it has to do with New Hampshire law.
Well, help us repeal that.
No, because I believe in affordable housing.
Well, yes, I do too, but help us repeal it at the state level so the towns can do it,
How do we do that?
not be forced.
But I have to say, all the things you're talking about, complying with rules and regulations and all that, you have to do that anyways, that's the law. It's not whether, and I wanna say one last thing,
I really have to say that this whole thing of implying that our town officials
are somehow on the take about this, I feel that
The same group that gives them $10,000 raises a week. Come on. Everybody has the right to talk.
for myself and for the other people that have worked very hard, who have written grants and brought this town money, that this is really kind of a slap in the face. And I really resent you coming to this town with your.
We don't. You can leave now.
All we did was, I'm sorry you feel that way, all we really wanted to do was to come and share our experiences and what we know about this program and how it affects other towns. The 800-pound gorilla is Westchester County. But let me just address a little bit of your concerns about workforce housing, because I am the workforce housing, and John's over there smiling. Workforce housing has a lot of vagueness to it. For example, you said what's reasonable and sufficient housing, realistic. Thank you. What does that mean in law? I mean, judges are scratching their heads. But it's also based on a case called Rindge versus the town of Chesterfield, where the court's decision said not only does the planning board have responsibility for the town in which it's located, but they must consider all of the housing in surrounding areas, which is where I'm going to get to the point with workforce housing. Workforce housing law does not even state in it what is a reasonable amount. But what you do is you rely upon the regional planning commissions to say, based on population, based on income levels, we're in Chester County. I'm a Hillsborough guy. But basically, it's a certain dollar amount. It's like $240,000, I think, would be considered and classified as a workforce housing unit. Now, my argument and position is that I'm sure you can find a significant amount of houses, maybe not a lot, but enough, that would qualify to be workforce housing based on those dollar amounts. But going back to that court decision, and I'm not going to bore you, okay? But the reality is the judge said that you must look at the surrounding towns too. Now in Brookline, I got Milford next to me. I got plenty of $240,000 homes. So to answer your question, is the law's there, it's very vague. I tried to change it to improve it, to delineate specific numbers and so forth. Couldn't get it anywhere. But, as I said in the beginning, there is a place for workforce housing, especially for people that can't live in the towns that they serve. School teachers, police, fire. That's why it's called workforce housing and not affordable. This is a moment
Yeah,
back here.
way in the back.
You've been referencing a grant. What grant are you specifically talking about here in Rindge?
It's a community planning grant that you accepted for almost $25,000.
One from Southwest Regional?
Does that work?
I used to ask for almost 2 weeks now to get the.
That grant was from Southwest Regional Planning Commission, and it
Okay.
essentially was applied for by the planning board. It was not a town grant. It was a grant that the planning board applied for to assist us in writing our zoning regulations. We've been many of you know, we've been without a planning director for a while. Also, unfortunately, the planning budget is one of the budgets that gets cut first on many occasions. So we.
We can't quite hear you.
Okay, so we basically have to kind of hunt around for resources. We needed assistance with rewriting and updating our zoning regulations so that they would be in compliance and in line with our master plan. So this, I think it's interesting. We're not Westchester County, New York, or Rindge, New Hampshire. It's like maybe 3,000 or so of us that are permanent, or 2,000 or so at college, so altogether about 5,000 of us here, depending upon the time of year. I will also say that I am on the planning board. I've been on the planning board for about 10 years or so now. And we do, I think, do a fairly good job of listening to what people have to say. We have addressed the workforce housing issue by some tweaks in our zoning regulations based on input from town folks, because a lot of folks are concerned because their kids graduate from high school or graduate from college, they get a job and they can't afford to live here.
Yeah.
And that's one of the gaps that we had and still have in our housing stock here in Rindge.
Let me give one of my cards, because if you have questions on workforce housing,
We're all set.
okay.
We're all set.
I was surprised to get your regional planning commission engaged.
No, they did not. We did that ourselves.
No, but I'm just saying is where they may have suggestions to go is New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. Those are the only ones I know that are giving out money for,
I know that we've taken care of that, we've addressed it, it's in the zoning regs, it is. We meet with our So I was curious about the grant, because maybe you mentioned the grant, specific about it, or what's else going on. Additionally, you mentioned tax.
Can you talk louder, please?
The tax increment financing for the Four Corners, you mentioned that. One of the things, it was highlighted, it was part of the recommendations, and I will say they are recommendations that came in from the Charrette. It is not a plan, they are recommendations. We are in the process of working through those recommendations. We've been holding a series of public meetings to give you more information on those before we determine what it is we're going to do next. One of the things you probably will notice that on those recommendations, there is no diner on there, but there's a diner down at the Four Corners now. So in town, we do our planning. Town folks determine what we want to have, where we want it to go, and how the town wants to. I know for many people who live here because of the rural environment, and at least from the planning board, we are committed to keeping that in place. So a lot of the things that you're talking about for an urban area, I can see that, but
we were here to talk about the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority and the relationship about, obviously, Representative Burke had his little graphics much greater than I do. But the reality is this is out there. And you as a planning board, and I think I prefaced my conversation by saying this is informational. And you as a planning board member should know, and you're certainly hearing from your constituents, they're very concerned about this process. So if anything, nothing but positive.
yeah, and I would welcome anyone here in the audience, and for those of you that aren't here, to stop in the planning office. All the documentation is available. We're a little bit short-staffed right now, so you may have to call first to make sure someone's there. But we do and accommodate folks, and when we get a planning director, what happens with that contract. But,
Well, would you answer one small question, then I'll get to that gentleman that's been patiently waiting. Go ahead, sir.
Kim, this,
hi, how are you?
hi, I'm thinking about HUD. Do we have a relationship with HUD at this point?
I know that some of the,
Yes or no?
you mentioned the workforce housing.
There have been a
No, this is-
number of grants in recent
Work on
years,
it.
and for those of you, you've probably heard of some of them. The Fast Roads Grant is a big one that's bringing broadband to town. We've had the Community Development Block Grant that helped build the senior housing at Payson Village, which, by the way, came through HUD. And we have had 2 grants.
Yes or no? Yes.
We've had 2 grants to work with Hopkins Associates on this regulatory review. And for those of you who were at the meetings in West Rindge Village at the church, those meetings were part of the conditions of the grant, that public input be sought from the community. And that's how Larry got involved. Larry came to those meetings. And I think it's great for someone who's lived in town his whole life and for generations to come out and get involved in the process. And that's what your elected planning board members are trying to facilitate.
All right.
We want the truth, we wanna get the truth.
For the people who wanna reverse what's been done and wanna fight against what they're doing, what do we do when we leave here? That's basically what I wanna know.
Okay, I'll answer that.
That's
right
what I
now.
really wanna know, because they can go back and forth all they want, but I just wanna know what to do when I leave.
Well, I just want to say about the grant, the Board of Selectmen accepted those grants after a public hearing that was noticed in the newspaper, and citizens came and gave input.
So why we don't know about this, but we didn't know about
You're not
that?
kidding.
Well, that's a good question.
So obviously you're not advertising properly.
I-
Well, I'm here for this.
Wait. You know what? As a selectman, wait.
How is it all the information got to us from them, but not from you?
Wait. These are your
You
neighbors.
don't have an answer.
Some of your friends. They probably don't get paid much, if anything is stipend. Let's not attack here. Let's just keep everything really at a low boil here. To the point, bring up the point, how would you find out? It's your responsibility, or in their case, they probably posted in the newspaper, you didn't see it, there was probably a posting at the post office. And to be totally honest with you, I mean, not everybody is like me or John, where, we want to read the paper, the details were all the way down to read. Because in my case, I made a mistake by signing something. I wanted to make up. So don't beat up on your town officials, because they really do.
They don't tell the truth.
So be nice. But to answer your question is, you have to stay involved a little bit, just have to read the local newspaper, or is it a posting, or things like that.
But what do we do when
Larry
we
becomes sort of town watch.
But what do we do next is what I'm saying. What do we do when we leave? What do we do next?
What's the next step?
What do we do when we leave here?
What we did in Goffstown is we went to the planning board and told them about this channel. I think it's too late. But then we just found out, Westchester, I'm in communication probably 2 to 3 times a week with Westchester to talk to them about this. They have been extremely helpful. They told me that if it got past the planning board, was heading to the ballot, they would send people over here to help us. That's how nice these people are. But what they ended up doing is the selectmen did keep the money. And we just found out, which I'm not impressed, they kept the smart code, which is the danger part of it. They put it in a drawer, and they said, oh, well, we don't need to vote on this. Well, they can bring it back in a couple of years. So we just went to the selectmen and said, no, you will send it to the planning board, have it voted down. And the planning board's waiting for it, and they said, yeah, the second it shows up.
The other thing too is, believe it or not, New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, the NHFA, is a quasi-governmental agency. It's covered under 204C, RSA 204C. It talks about providing loans to residents and obtaining money and things like that. but there's nothing in its charge that talks about community planning grants. So I called Ben Frost and I said, under what authority are you granted that? And he rattled off 2 or 3. He's a lawyer. And I said, Ben, those are stretches. And he goes, well, that's what we think, and HUD agrees with us. Of course, HUD's going to agree because they want to dole out the money, because that's what their job is. Now, what I may be doing, and John's smiling, is I may go to the minority leader and ask him to contact the Attorney General to find out if they're within the scope of the law. In other words, they have a legal right to do this,
Good.
to lend out grants. Because, you know what, if you can get right at the source, maybe we can stop the exposure to the town. Now, it may not stop you from getting other grants, which are fine. And let me also say, and if I didn't say it already, is you may want workforce housing, or you may want affordable housing, or you may want a mixed-use district in the town of Rindge. That's entirely up to you. But just make sure, if you're getting money for it, and I'll say this to your planning members, if you ever come across it, check the fine print. Make sure you're not exposed.
And I would agree with that. The one thing that everyone in this room can do is to show up at the next meeting. We haven't even set the date yet. It'll be published, and we'll do what we can to get that information out. Well, and I hear you on that, because I don't have, most folks that doesn't have internet, so I don't have internet at home. So I get my information from the newspaper. I don't get to the town office that often. Second, first and third Tuesdays of the month, I'm there. So I miss some things that take place. But it gets posted at the post office, it gets posted at the town hall, it gets posted on the town's website. But for those of us that don't have internet access, it's a little bit of a challenge to get the information. So newspapers, definitely, and most likely but please do show up. We do want your input, and we want it at this point in time so that we can incorporate the things that you want as we move forward.
Can we turn it back, in your opinion? If we wanna send this money back, can we do it and get out of it?
We haven't, the money they're talking about, where's the time in it?
I have a question, and I'll put the contracts up on the website tomorrow. Anyone can read them, I have them on my phone, if anyone wants to take a moment, I can read them aloud to you. Nobody's trying to hide anything.
I have a question, I guess what,
We are still working through that, we have hired a consultant to work with us.
It's Roger Hawk Consulting, he specializes in slack rope management. Okay, now, Carlotta sent me paperwork saying you've already paid him 2 different payments, 16,000 and some odd, 8,000 and something like that. You already paid them. Now, we're having restricted, this is what I'm getting at. I got it all. One of the questions I couldn't hear you earlier, where did you say you got money for?
South, it was brand new South.
That's one grant, right? There have been many.
I'm right now, the NHSA website explaining the money you got and everything.
I can only speak to the grant planning board, as I said, and that's the
Well, we got one question back
yeah,
here.
well, I guess Cheryl McCabe Sharon, I've been a resident of Rindge for almost 30 years, and I guess I need a little clarification. Because I guess what I'm hearing from the planning board member is she doesn't think that we have a relationship with HUD. So where exactly did the money come from? It came from Southwest, what did you call it?
Southwest Regional Planning.
So where do they get their funding? And do we know if,
They're under the state umbrella.
okay, so do we know if there are strings attached behind the check that came from Southwest?
We have to read the contract.
So has anyone read the contract? Has anyone on the planning board read the contract?
We did read it. What I'm gonna say in all honesty, I came here straight from work. We're supposed to be at the planning board meeting tonight, so I don't have any of that information with me.
Okay. And I'm not here to bully you in any way. Like the simple mistake that he made as a selectman, he thought he was doing something good. And I think that that's probably true in this case. But like people are saying, we need to repeal it because I think it could have huge ramifications on our property taxes moving forward. So I don't think that we should be infighting with each other and blaming each other. We need to work together to try and get to the bottom of what this is. And
I think your planning board members hear you loud and clear. And they have the same concern.
Just as a quick aside, and also just as a reminder, not criticism, but in future, could we have like a planning board meetings where more people can attend, like perhaps in a venue as large as this, or maybe even larger at the school? Because every meeting that I've ever been to has been in the.
Yeah.
I think that as standard procedure, they should be, because a lot of people simply do not go because it's a small room, it's an uncomfortable room where we usually have. So.
We're not doing that just now, and I think we need to have that kind of voice from the to really get us involved.
We don't have the budget, I'm sorry,
I'm
we
not,
don't.
well, I'm not saying, you know, he got the 500, he got
First meeting that is planning board function. And I was the one handing out the flyer on Saturday. On Saturday, I saw lots of views. Some of you took the flyer, some didn't, and that's okay. We had maybe 7,500 people. What we will do next time is try to get a larger venue. So, and I'm seeing that this space probably isn't even going to be big enough. So we'll have to look at a larger venue, which may well have to be the school, like at the school.
Take it up to college.
Either the cafeteria or
Not everyone does college, field house. Probably gonna need the field
This
house.
gentleman said a few minutes ago about language and about keeping it really simple and straightforward. You know, none of the legal jargon, none of the confusing language, but just straightforward English.
In defense of your planning board though, that's not always the case because they bring it into their town council. I don't know who your town council is. If you change the ordinance to have it be compliant with law. But they can explain what it is, and I'm sure they do. You know what, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for having us in Rindge. Is it one more person? Oh, because you know, John and I have done battles, and John will attest to it. We've turned some committee votes, I turned one of John's votes on the House floor. But I want to tell you that, you know, your public officials do a great job. You know, sometimes you may not, sometimes you may not see them. But I hope we shared some information upon the process, about this money, and that you enjoyed yourself, and that maybe you continue the conversation, if not here, or at another place.
These are great guys, they're very well informed and they care about, no payday loan, there's not a good issue with attorney. But I would just want everybody to know that I did vote against this workforce housing legislation because I did feel that it was affecting zoning. And at the end of the day, zoning needs to occur in the local level.
Absolutely.
But here's something I think that language I have to pick up, and I really want everybody to understand this. The problem, even with our being an SB2 town, that on the ballot, all it's going to say is the title of what the ordinance changes. As all you know, many of you know, if I had my little issues with zoning recently, and we learned a lot about zoning, okay, and I ventured to go back and learn what a tourist home was and how the hell we ever voted for that, okay? But when we voted for it, all it said was bed and breakfast tourist home ordinance. The language, all the words that then were voted on were never on the ballot. So even if you want simple language, It's not there. So what I hear tonight is that if the planning board is going to come forward with some new zoning changes in the next meeting, that they will absolutely make sure that everybody has an opportunity to come in and see all the language that one title is about to propose. And that's the way.
I just wanted to say in response to John's comment, when I do see the titles, it says, paragraph 3, sentence 5, change these words to this words, how do I know the context of that?
Yeah.
You need to see the entire article before, and then the entire article after with the highlights, marked.
That's what comes in SB2.
That's right.
Well, I just wanna bring up real quick, I wanna finish with what the gentleman started with his question was, what you can do. We have a group of people that have the time and they're gonna go through all of our grants. There are, not in my eyes, but they say there are some good grants. I don't like any grants personally, but there are a few. What we're doing in Goffstown, because we just found out that we're not done with this, we thought with the planning board voting this down that it would be a done deal. We're gonna force the selectmen to send the money back. And how we're doing it is we're gonna have a warrant article, it's gonna go on the ballot, and it's gonna instruct them. Our town administrator, she just said, but the selectmen don't have to listen to you, sir. And I said,
25
well,
signatures.
Sounds right.
yeah, well, even if it passes the vote, so let's say 2,000 people vote for it, 300 don't, say no. It passes. Bottom line, the selectmen don't have to listen to us. But one of our selectmen jumped up and said, hey, I'm gonna listen to the voters. So he will send it if we pass this, and that's what we're gonna do. Because in this particular grant, that money has to go back. End of subject. We don't want no part of it. We're gonna kill the smart code, and we're gonna kill the plan, and then we're gonna send the money back, and then we're done. And then all grants from here on out, from what I hear, they're gonna be brought in front of the voters. That's gonna be another warrant article.
Yeah.
If you have any more questions, I'll answer.
I just comment that, I mean, the grants don't work like that. You can't, you can buy the grant cycle, there's no time for it to go into the warrant. You can have a public hearing, but you can't, it's not gonna work that way.
Well, then I'll be happy. Yeah, I'll be very happy. Yes, I take taxes over here, because then we can control.
Folks, one more thing, there is a sign-up sheet out there, it's not mandatory, but if you put your name, email address, you don't even have to put your name, just put your email address, I will try my best to get every information that I can.
Thank you very much.
See you, Max. Thanks for coming.